Well, evening starting to come here in southern Idaho. Alpine guy here, and I want to see if I can clear up a few misconceptions or a few things that might be fuzzy to the Alpine owners in regards to the Lippert 6-point hydraulic leveling system. For those of you that have the newer Alpines that have the equalizer hydraulic system, the functions and descriptions that I'm going to talk about, and as far as how the hydraulic levelers themselves work in tandem and such, is basically the same. It's just the nomenclature from one system to the other is different. So if you own the equalizer system, this video will still be useful to you, as it will explain some things about the hydraulics, and it will also explain the basics on how to do a 0 point, which on the equalizer systems will be a null setting, I believe. Okay, so we're doing a front view right now. We're looking at the front landing gear. And again, this is a Lippert hydraulic system, 6-point level up. The two front hydraulic gear are connected in tandem with hydraulic lines for extend and retract. And so what that means is what happens to one hydraulic cylinder is going to happen to the other. So if you get a leaking line on either of the front landing gear, it's going to affect both of them, and your fifth wheel is going to drop at the front end. Okay, now we're looking at the driver's side, the mid and the rear levelers. These are also connected in tandem on the left side, and then on the passenger side, those mid and rear levelers are also connected in tandem. Each side, from the driver's side to the passenger side, for the mid and rear levelers, are separate systems. They have separate lines and a separate position on the manifold, as well as a separate hydac valve, which is a mechanically closed valve that electrically opens when your control panel tells it to either let fluid flow and extend one side or the other, or fluid retract and bring down one side or the other. So to further explain this, if I'm trying to level the left side, then I'm going to come up to my control panel and I'm going to turn it on, and I'm simply going to extend the left side. And what that's actually extending is only the mid and rear levelers on the driver's side. Some are going to want to argue with me and say, well, the front landing gear is moving also. Well, of course it is. If I lift up on the left side of this fifth wheel, there is no hydraulic pressure being sent to these two front landing gears. But what's going to happen is, as I lift up on the left side of the Alpine to make it higher, then this passenger side front landing gear is going to compress. In other words, it's going to be pushed upwards because I'm lifting the driver's side of the fifth wheel, and that fluid, since it's being compressed by that cylinder, and remember the two front landing gear are connected in tandem, what that's going to do is make the driver's side front landing gear extend a little bit. And so you're going to think, well, or you're going to want to argue and say, well, it's hydraulically moving. It's not hydraulically moving under power. It's simply moving because one landing gear cylinder is being compressed and the liquid has to go somewhere. And so what it's going to do is, as the left side, the driver's side, as it lifts, it's going, and that passenger front right landing gear compresses, that fluid is going to want to flow over to the left front landing gear. And yes, in fact, that front landing gear on the left side will extend a little bit further. That probably made everything just clear as mud to everybody, but if you're not quite sure what I just said, rewind the video a little bit and listen to what I said again, and then look at the hydraulic schematic for either the Lippert or the EQ system, and you'll see, in fact, how these are connected. One of the problems that I hear about and see from time to time with the Lippert system as well as the equalizer system is when folks turn the control panel on, either things don't work right, the display is garbled, there's no display, or when you select a function, the system appears to go haywire and have a mind of its own, to include such things as during auto level it may lift an entire side, both wheels completely off the ground, and then continue to lift, and of course then you panic and you hit the off button to stop it. If you encounter problems like that, the easiest way usually to correct and clear that issue, and you have to remember this is a small computer, what it's doing is it's reading stored values in the forward front control module, which I'll show you in just a minute. It's reading stored values in there that tell the system whether the front of the fifth wheel is high or low, and whether the driver's side or passenger side is high or low. And so let's say I turned on my display and it either wasn't responding, things were garbled, or when I selected auto level or something like that, the system didn't operate right, and in general it just appeared to go haywire. Then what I would do, folks, is I would come to the front forward compartment, open the door, and then if you look way up high, you'll see a small module way up here, and we'll zoom in just a little bit. This is the forward control module for the Lippert hydraulic leveling system. There is also a remote rear sensor, and that sensor is mounted way at the back of the fifth wheel, usually almost dead center above the rear axle, and you can't see it because it's up underneath the belly coroplast. And what that sensor does is it feeds its position that it's reading in degrees up to the forward control module, which in turn is talking to that control panel to determine whether or not the Alpine is level front to back and side to side, and if it needs to move up or down. So if I had a problem, the two easiest ways usually to clear the issue is one, open the forward compartment door like I've got open right now, and if you look on this forward control module, and we'll zoom in, you'll see one plug with a single red wire. That is a 12-volt DC power that comes directly from the battery. Even if you turn your battery cutoff switches off, the leveling system still has power because it's wired directly to the battery. What you can do is you can reach up and disconnect that one white plug with the single red wire, wait a couple of minutes, and then plug that back in. The other thing you could do is you could come over to your hydraulic compartment and look for that single red wire that you see that I have in my hand. And again, this runs directly from the battery over to that forward control module. And if I open this up, you'll see there's an ATC fuse in here, 7.5 amps. And I can pull that fuse, wait a couple of minutes, and put that fuse back in. By killing that power either at the forward control module or at that ATC fuse that goes to the battery, I remove all 12 volts DC power to the forward control module, the remote rear sensor that's located behind the rear axle centered, and also the level up control panel, as well as the high deck valves and the dual polarity solenoid and motor. So nothing will work until you plug that 12 volt source back in. Usually if you wait a couple of minutes and then plug that back in, usually the system will respond correctly and work fine. If it still doesn't work and you're getting no display, and if you try some functions, you try to turn it on and no lights show up, such as I turn this on and I can see that I've got a green center light, no red lights are lit, which means nothing is low as far as the system is concerned. And when I say low, I mean low as far as being level or unlevel. If you don't have the display and everything, then you've taken that power wire off and put it back on. There's one other thing you can do, and right up here is a small little recess. Put a small screwdriver in there, gently pry outward, pull this panel out, and you'll find a single Canon plug, or not a Canon plug, you'll find a single wiring harness that's pressed into the circuit board. You can remove that and reseat it just in case you had a bad connection, and then try again. If you still have no display, no lights come on, and the system doesn't do anything, then most likely the problem is, provided you have 12 volts at that red wire, most likely the control panel has failed. And what I'm going to do now, and there's probably 100 videos out there like the one I'm fixing to make, is I'm going to show you how to do the 0-point calibration on the fifth wheel after I manually level the fifth wheel front to back and side to side to my satisfaction. And what I'm going to do right now is I've already turned on the display, and I'm going to arrow up, and we're going to take a look and see what it says as far as front to rear. So right now we're showing front to rear is minus 0.1. We'll arrow up one more time, and it shows side to side is 0.0 degrees. So what all that mumbo jumbo means is it's saying that the front to back, the rear is minus 1/10 of a degree lower than the front, which means the front is just a little bit high. And it says that the side to side is perfectly level, which I know it's not perfectly level. Let's go up inside the Alpine and I'll explain to you why I know it's not perfectly level, side to side and front to back. Right now I've placed my level excuse me, on the countertop for the stove, and we'll zoom in just a little bit here, and so that you can see that in fact the bubble is not centered, which means from front to back, the Alpine is sitting nose low. I'm going to raise this level up just a little bit, and as you can see, when I raise it up a little bit, the bubble is centered, and so the fifth wheel would then theoretically be level. And now what I've done, my slides are closed at the moment, but I think we can see what we need to do. On this floor model, we have a center island with the sinks, and we're going to take a look at the side to side measuring on the countertop, and let's zoom in a little bit, and we can see in fact that level is not level, even though that display shows 0, 0. And if I lift up slightly on the other side of the level that I have in my hand here, forgive me, I'm old folks, so I got to stop and think about what I'm saying. You can see in fact that the bubble will center. So that tells me my side to side is off just a little, and the front to back is off just a little. And when you make these measurements to determine manually using a level whether your fifth wheel is actually level or not, some of these cabinets in here may not be exactly level. So what I've done now is I've moved the scale and set it down on the floor, and as we can see, the front to back is in fact the same as when we measured up on the countertop. And again, I still have the level on the floor, and I've turned the level across the floor so that we can measure side to side level. And let's see if I can zoom in without hitting the wrong button. And as you can see, in fact, we aren't level side to side. Okay, so we've determined by measuring with a level that in fact this Alpine is out of adjustment a little bit during an auto level in regards to front to back and side to side. So let's fix that. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn the display on. We're going to turn the display on, and then we're going to manually come up here to where we can see front to back reading. I know that the front is low by using the level inside on the floor. So now what I'm going to do is simply press the front button on the control panel, and we're going to raise the front end just a little bit. And so now we're showing 0 to 0 front to rear. Okay, we're going to leave the level on the floor since I don't have to climb up and down the steps, and I know that the reading on my floor is the same as it is on the cabinets. And we're going to zoom in now on this level, and you can see in fact The Alpine floor is level. I know the cabinets are going to be level. I have a nice centered bubble. So now we have the front to back taken care of. Now I've turned the level sideways, still on the floor, and I can look and see that in fact sideways the Alpine is unlevel. The driver's side is lower than the passenger side. So let's go manually raise the left side or driver's side of the fifth wheel. Okay, we've come back out to the control panel. Front to rear shows 0 to 0, and the fifth wheel in fact is level front to back when we look at our level that I have laying on the floor. Now what I want to do is I want to manually raise the left side or the driver's side because I know it is low when we looked at that level just a minute ago on the floor. If I press this left button right now, nothing is going to happen, and you can see that all I get is a red light. And you're saying, well, why is that? When you press the front and the rear, you could raise it up and down. Well, that's just the way the system operates. And so I need to manually raise just the left side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrow down until I get where it says manual mode. Now I'm going to press enter. And now I want to raise this left side just a little bit. And you notice I've got a display now. And in fact, you notice that the left side or the driver's side actually raised up. Let's go check that level now. Okay, we're looking at the level. It's laying on the floor, side to side, and you can see that bubble is nicely centered in between the scales here on the level. So the side to side is good. And let's move the level around one more time and recheck the front to back. And the front to back is perfectly level. So now I have an Alpine that is in fact level front to back, side to side. So after we just checked with a level side to side and front to back, we know that this Alpine is actually physically level side to side and front to back. And what we need to do, and we're going to go back one more time and check and see what this display shows. It shows front to rear is 0, 0. Side to side, it shows minus 0.2 degrees. We don't care what this says. We care what that level says, because this control panel is reading the remote rear sensor that's mounted behind these rear axles. And I can't show it to you, but it's reading a sensor that's just behind or directly behind the rear axle, centered above it, underneath that coroplast. And it's comparing the signal to the forward front control module. So both those modules talk to each other, and they in turn tell that control panel what they see, and in turn tells the control panel what it needs to do, whether the pump needs to run, whether it needs to retract a side, extend a side, etc. And somebody's going to say, well, that display shows that it's minus 0.2 degrees, so why can't I trust that? Well, the reason for that is we have no idea if the plate that's mounted up under this coroplast, where that remote sensor is mounted on, is in fact perfectly level, nor do we know if the sensor is perfectly level back there, nor do we know if the front forward module is centered and perfectly level. Okay, so now we have a perfectly level Alpine that we've manually leveled, we verified it, and so what we need to do now is we need to do what's called a 0-point calibration. And what that does is it erases the currently stored information in the forward control module, and it writes the new set of parameters that it will receive based on us manually leveling this fifth wheel front to back, side to side. Okay, so now we're going to attempt to do the 0-point calibration. And the instructions for this you can find on the Lippert app. Look for 0-point calibration, and there's also PDF uploaded in the group's file section that for Lippert hydraulic level up system. The manual is there, and it also will tell you how to do the 0-point calibration. Okay, so we're back at the control panel. We know that we have the Alpine manually leveled front to back, side to side. And now what we're going to do is set the 0 point, which is going to store these new values for the auto level to work from. So we're going to turn the display off, and it's very important, turn the display off. Now we're going to press the front button 10 times, followed by pressing the rear button 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if you notice that the display came alive and it says 0 point calibration, you can see all the lights are flashing and it says enter to set, power to exit. So I want to store this new value, and what we're going to do is press enter. 0 point stability check, please wait. 0 point set correctly, and you notice that the display turned itself off. Okay, so let's see if the auto level in fact will re-level to the new settings that we just manually entered for the auto level. So what I'm going to do is turn the display on, and I'm going to go into manual mode. And what I'm going to do is, you notice I press the retract button. We're going to raise the rear levelers, and that's bringing up both sides of the mid and rear levelers. And we'll bring them up, we'll go ahead and bring them up all the way. And now I'm going to turn the retract button off. We're still in manual mode, and I'm going to manually raise the fifth wheel up a little bit. And as you can see, the nose is raising. Okay. And now what we're going to do from this point is we're going to hit auto level, and we'll see if in fact the fifth wheel, once it finishes auto leveling and says it was successful, hopefully, then we'll go compare the measurements on that level. To prevent yourself from having auto level errors, I always raise the nose of the fifth wheel slightly high, which it's, in my case, 9 times out of 10, it's always going to be a little bit high because I've just unhooked it from the fifth wheel hitch, and so the nose is going to be setting high. Make sure the front of the nose of the Alpine is high. The reason for that is the first motion that the Alpine is going to make when you select auto level is it's going to want to find a negative value front to back, and so it's going to want to dip the nose, and it'll dip it down to where it just detects a negative value front to back, and it will stop that motion. It will raise the front to where it has a 0 to 0 reading, and then the driver's side mid and rear levels will come down, and then the passenger side mid and rear levelers will come down, and then the front to back will do one more quick correction front to back, and then hopefully if the auto level is successful, we'll have one green centered dot right here, and we'll hear a beep and it'll say auto level successful. And so, without further ado, let's hit auto level. And it's going to say grounding jacks. You notice, in fact, the front of that Alpine's coming down. It went down to where it found a value below, a value that was negative. Now it's raising the front up, and it's looking at the front to back. It's going to raise it up just a little bit more. Once it's satisfied with that initial front to back, then the driver's side mid and rear levelers will both come down. As you can see, they're both coming down. And once that rear leveler touches all the way, the Alpine will lift on the driver's side. Now what's going to happen is on the passenger side, you can see those levelers are coming down. Let's see if we can zoom in. And it's going to lift the Alpine on the right a little bit. And now it's going to make one more front to back correction, which it just did. And now if things are successful, we should have a center single green dot flashing. It says it's extending the front just a little bit more. It's still analyzing and looking at that level signal. and now it says successful. We have one green dot, no red lights are lit. So now let's go check and look at the level and see, is the Alpine really level? Okay, we're going to zoom in on the level, and we're going to look at the bubbles, and we can see that we're within the black. And so as far as I'm concerned, that's a pretty good level front to back. And let's take a look at the side to side, since that was also off. And let's see what we have side to side. And you can see the side to side is in fact perfectly centered in between those black hash mark lines. So we know now that that auto level is reset, and we know by verifying it with this level that we've got a good front to back and a good side to side, and that we have stored a new set of values in the level up system regarding our auto level 0 point. So that's a quick dissertation on how I do it. That's the first time that I have reset the auto level in 7 years on this Alpine. It's now just finished its 9th year of use. And so I did notice on the last trip when I auto leveled, it was just a little bit off front to back and just a little bit off side to side. So I wanted to wait till we got home, where I was on the concrete pads here, and I could do a new auto level. And if you notice that the wood blocks underneath my legs, they're just they're cheap junk. It's what I use here at the house when I'm storing the Alpine in between trips, or in this case getting it ready to winterize. Normally all 6 leveler pads would be sitting on those nice wood blocks that I've shown. It's a single block. It measures about 5 inches tall, each one of them. And by using those 5-inch tall blocks, and I have another video on my YouTube channel that explains all that, but by using a 5-inch block, that means that there's 5 inches less of this piston having to extend down. And so the Alpine is going to be much more stable, because instead of having all of this hanging out, I've only got about this much hanging out on these pistons. So hopefully the video clears up a few things. Maybe you learned a few things. If you have the equalizer system, the operation of the system is basically the same. The nomenclature is a little bit different. They use a null point setting, and there's a few other things that they use. But basically, from a hydraulic standpoint and an electric standpoint, they're basically about the same system. And before I forget, we'll turn this off. The display will time out and turn itself off after a while, but we'll go ahead and turn that off. So we now got a new auto level stored in there, and the Alpine will be ready when we wake it back up next spring.